So the last couple of videos have been dominated by long sections covering the Patreon, to the point where the previous video was literally only 50% about the figure I was actually reviewing. So this time, I just want to launch into this without much delay. I'd just like to say thanks to my amazing patrons, and let's get into this. This is yet another figure I would not have without the help of Isaiah Jones, so huge thanks to him for locating and acquiring this for me. This is the last figure I paid for before my great financial calamity, so let's hope it's a great one. It's Studio Series 86 Slag. His name is Slag. It's not Slug, it's Slag. I know it's a bad word in the UK, but it's not in the rest of the entire damn world, so if they want to change it in the UK, that's fine. But everywhere else, it's still Slag. Hell, as far as I can tell, in the UK, it has all the verbal weight of the word crap. I've seen British 5-year-olds fire off that word like it's a natural part of the respiratory process. When toddlers can say a word and no one bats an eye, it does not count as a bad word anymore. And if they wanted the name to be something else, then why didn't they go with something like Slog? Why are they ripping off 2/3 of Sludge's name? Cut out the D and the E, and you've got this terrible thing they came up with. At least Slog is distinct. Get this confusing Saruman bullshit out of my house. Fun fact, I was so goddamn confused why Gandalf didn't realize the main villain of the franchise was the bad guy when I watched Two Towers. Why the fuck would you name the two main villains the exact same thing with only one letter difference when they aren't supposed to be connected? Anyway, Slag, or Slog if you don't want to say Slag, but don't you bring that mollusk noise into my house, is a figure that some people are calling better than the 86 Grimlock, and the best thing that the 86 line has produced. Do I feel the same way? No. Jesus, no. This is not the equal of that. And if you're like, how can you possibly not like this more than the Grimlock? Well, my response is, what do you have to say about this? But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to like the look of this thing more than I do. This does look better in person than I expected, since from the pictures I found these huge protrusions his arms are attached to unsettling. And yeah, they totally are, but they aren't as bad as I thought they were going to be. These really could have stood to extend half as far as they do though. The way this is just makes him awkwardly wide. Once again, we have this leg type that I hate on the Earthrise Optimus because it made his legs too long. And here, I hate it because it makes his legs too short. Yes, that's right. This comes away with the exact opposite problem because of the same design decision. A problem the Grimlock does not suffer despite also utilizing the exact same engineering. It's coming down to the fact that Grimlock's legs are mere millimeters longer in the thighs here, and possibly the fact that they are black instead of white. Something about the color balance might be helping here. These either need to be like this, which could make them look too long, this, which is awkward painting one part two tones, or this, which might not be enough, but could help to imply that his legs are longer than what we are seeing. Then you get to his shins and they just look weird. I don't know, these just look unfinished to me. And then you swoop around to the back, and this here is what I find really frustrating. This is not a design that he was ever supposed to have with the tail hanging off the back. The least they could have done is split it up and attach it to the wings. And this isn't just ugly, it's remarkably in the way. You can't help but bump this thing all the time, and the whole apparatus comes crashing down when you do, because apparently no one who worked on this thought that locking tabs were a good idea. This entire segment is basically held up by the friction on these two downwards facing tabs, and let me tell you, there's no grip here. So these are basically holding on exclusively because the whole thing is hinged in such a way that it's kind of rubbing up against the spine before it can fall free. This is like the backpack equivalent of the Kingdom Trax's legs. It's less of a problem because he's not trying to stand on this, but it's still a massive frustration. Also, his wings pop off for literally no reason. These desperately needed to be pinned in place. They come off almost as easily as the side flaps on the Siege Ironhide's legs. If you have an original Siege Ironhide and not one of the later fixed retools, you are probably cringing right now. Lastly, these shoulder spikes really could have stood to hinge down out of sight or something. Oh, lastly, am I the only one who really hates this little pointless round nub that's here for no reason? So yeah, I'd call this backpack the source of all this figure's problems. Now this may sound insane to you, but excluding all those issues I just complained about, this thing looks really good. Yes, there were a lot of problems, but this still hits the spirit of the character very well, and I'm just kind of a sucker for the Dinobot aesthetic. As many problems as I may have with this guy, he somehow makes me even more excited for the rest of them, though I do hope the Swoop is a leader like all the other Dinobots. One thing this guy is knocking out of the park is the head sculpt, which stands in a weird juxtaposition with the Grimlocks. Honestly, this whole figure feels more in step with the rest of the 86 line than the Grimlock, and here is where it's probably best on display. Grimlock's head felt like a reinterpretation, not what was shown in the show, and not the design that they've mostly settled on since, more a blending of the two. This here, on the other hand, is what they would put on a masterpiece figure if they ever get around to making it. This is incredibly accurate. Another weird difference is that this is much bigger. This is probably 50% larger than Grimlock's head. I love the expression on it. Most official Hasbro figures go with a completely neutral expression, but this is subtly and deeply pissed off, like Slags are often wont to do. Yes, this head sculpt is nailing it, and it's also kind of part of the problem. Like, don't get me wrong, I would have called foul if this weren't red, but the design shouldn't have had a red head in the first place. The whole thing has just always been a giant slab of crimson. I like it because it's nostalgic for me, but there is just no denying that this needed a good bit more color breakup. This is missing the white that it's supposed to have on the face fence, so that's weird. And if we are going for super show loyal, then this head is supposed to be bisected by a plate, but I don't think anyone actually wanted that. Honestly, looking at these pictures, yes, this is very accurate, but I almost feel like they ripped off the Giga Powers head. Like, it's not a flat-out mold copy, but this has an astonishingly similar vibe. Overall, this is a fantastic head on a good body, which is kind of the exact inverse of the Grimlock, which is a good head on a fantastic body. It suffers from several visual hiccups, and the backpack makes handling it a chore. Not a lot of this can be fixed by an upgrade kit, at least not in the looks department. But while I have no idea how an upgrade kit company would go about fixing the backpack, I'm sure one can, which would make this a lot less aggravating and a lot more worth our while. Simply put, fixing the backpack would fix more than half of my issues with this figure. So let's talk about my other issues with this figure. The accessories. This guy, once again, does not come with a sword, which literally everyone wants. Instead, he comes with his gun. This is fine. I don't find it anywhere near as compelling as the Grimlocks, but it's okay. One nice thing about it is that I think the designers snuck a siege peg onto the end of the barrel. Like, for some reason, I don't think they were allowed to have these because most don't, and this is tiny. I think it's so small so it can sneak past someone. Seriously, why are the Dinobots and Scourge like the only ones who are allowed to play with the Siege's toy box? Anyways, then we have Daniel. How is this thing worse than the wheelie? It has these arms out on stalks now, so it's even less useful than before. How has this been like the year of bad exosuit humans from the G1 movie? Trash! Poseability on this guy is actually better than the Grimlock, which is remarkable because that thing was impressive on that front. Well above average range on the head, which is excessively hard to get at, with great up and down. Shoulders pull a reasonable amount more than a 90, though the right one likes to lock up right here. Also, the ratchets on the right one are way stronger. Double jointed elbows that look a lot better than the Grimlocks, though you have to bend them in a specific order or they won't go as far as they possibly can, but once you do, it's almost maximum. Slight sword wielding wrists that you can cheat for more. Legs kick forward great, out to the side good, and back is annoying bumping into that loose mess, but it works pretty well there too. Double jointed knees with insanely strong ratchets, but they almost go maximum. And ankle pivots, but no other motion on the foot. So yes, the Grimlock was already well above average, and this is even more so, though many of the ratchets are way too tight. So, if we are only grading on posability, then this is where this guy would come out on top. But you know, there's more to it than just posing. Transformation faux forms. I'd say it both has no excuse, as this easily could be the lower jaw, but I guess they did this to hide the head in the roof of the mouth. But what really gets me is his toes. These are faux forming parts, and they didn't have any reason to be. These are meant to look like the golden vents on his back, but they actually end up as part of his tail. These very easily could have been the real vents if they just designed the heels to fold down like with the Grimlock. This is almost a really good transformation, but there are frustrations to it shouldn't have. For starters, pegging in the chest piece should be really satisfying, but it's not. The feeling you get off this is where all the joy in the universe goes to die. It's not a satisfying click, but a soggy squish that you just can't appreciate without handling this. And then the backpack hates you and wants you dead. If I can get through this without knocking one of the wings off, it will be a miracle. And I physically cannot get this tab to peg in no matter what. Also, the gun parts forms, and this would just be weapon storage if it didn't become the final segment of the tail. It's not the worst, but it's just this unnecessary pain that didn't have to exist. And the alt mode is just fucking fantastic. Like, I don't think there's a third-party figure out there that captures his alt mode so well. There is very little for me to complain about here. But I'm gonna. His legs come across too long. Rear ones especially, but you can adjust that by rolling them up into the hips a little more. But they're still a huge problem. They're just so thin, like a fillet of leg. And the joint on them is really ugly. Plus, from behind, they are nothing but gaps. And the tail ending in white bugs me. Outside that though, this is all positive. The head is amazing and can look up a tiny amount. I don't even know why this joint exists. I almost think it's that way you can get a little more access to the robot head, and that's about it. Mouth opens, fire blast, and the limbs for the most part work great. This is a good figure, bordering on fantastic. If it just weren't for the shitty backpack, I'd be over the moon. Even if that were fixed, this would not be the equal of the Grimlock though. The robot mode has too many visual problems. The transformation isn't as good, alt mode has less posability, and is less accurate while still being really accurate. This is a phenomenal figure, definitely the best Slag Hasbro has ever produced. But there is still easy room for improvement. This is not quite the must-have that I think the Grimlock is. But I think anyone who gets this will be pretty pleased with it. Still one of the best figures to come out in the last year, or the last several. If you want one, rest assured you will not be wasting your money in getting it. And while I'm opposed to getting upgrade kits to take a bad figure and make them okay, like with the Cliff Jump ER, I'm all for kits that make a figure like this that was already worth the money into its fantastic final form. So, if someone ever fixes this guy's problems, I will be all over that kit. If I can afford it. But the Patreon will need more support before I can do that. I did not think I was going to be plugging Patreon at the end of that sentence till it happened. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.